Welcome, everyone. We're really grateful that you came in your evening to be with us. My name is Ben Cashton. I'm a filmmaker and producer in South Africa, and formerly an economic advisor in the Mandela presidency. And that's where my journey with IP started, because in those days, it was not about copyright, it was about access to medicines and the whole question of affordable antiretroviral medicines in South Africa. But today, we're talking about the promotion of artificial intelligence, AI for good, in the global south. And we have an amazing panel. We have Professor Beatriz Busaniche, who is an expert in intellectual property and digital rights, and a lecturer at the University of Buenos Aires, and a member of the data team of the Latam GPT project, and also president of the Vía Libre Foundation. We have next to the right, Dr. Alexandra García, a biochemist with a master's and a PhD in neurosciences. So she doesn't need too much artificial intelligence. And she's a project specialist and the leader of the Data and Strategic Alliances team for Latam GPT at the Centro Nacional de Inteligencia Artificial in Chile. We have Professor Gloria Emezue, who is here from Nigeria, an expert in gender studies and digital humanities at the Alex Ekwueme Federal University in Nigeria. And she comes from a project called Lanfrica, which is very concerned about fostering innovation in language technologies in Africa. And last but not least, we have Chebet Koros, who is an intellectual property law expert from Nairobi, Kenya, at the Center for Intellectual Property and Information Technology Law at Strathmore University, where she leads intellectual property law research in its intersection with AI. So I don't know if we win the prize for the first AI panel, which is women only, which is another explanation. Yeah, women of the global south. So it's interesting being a South African, coming here from South Africa and reflecting on knowledge and access to knowledge and accurate information. I want to project a slide, and I started preparing for this session by reflecting a little bit on what we get, the information we get from AI in South Africa, and whether it can help us correct any inaccuracies. So I typed that into ChatGPT. I wanted to know what the answer would be. And I was somewhat pleased by the answer that I got from a very leading AI platform, which corrected some inaccuracies that have been floating around from some source or another. So then I went a little further and asked, is South Africa doing the nasty things that we've been accused of? And this is the answer I got, which again I was pleased by. But the AI tool I was using stuck in a video for me, and it stuck a video in with a bunch of people whose views sort of contradicted the message in the text. People saying they want their land back, but it's mostly white protesters there. So it made me reflect a little bit. What is the source material that AI has to work with? Maybe AI doesn't have the right source material. It's somehow coming up with the right answer, but its inputs are somewhat problematic. So I went a little further and said, let's look at some positive news from Africa, from South Africa. What can you tell us? Everybody knows about Christian Barnard, who was the first heart transplanted. But some of these were news to me, actually, that South Africa was very involved in developing the first CAT scan technology. I heard about the third one. So this is 2019. In the last 5 years, a South African medical technologist printed using a 3D printer artificial implanted bones to go in your ear to restore hearing to those who have never heard in their lives. So I was very grateful to have AI in front of me for that purpose. And then I thought, but wait a minute, where is this information from? It's a mixture of sources we can rely on, sources we maybe can't rely on. So I tried this question: restrict your answer to information only from peer-reviewed medical journals. And this is the answer I got. Now, the question is as particularly for Africans in the global and people in the global south, is this a good answer or a bad answer? Do we want the big tech around the world that is driving AI today to have the most up-to-date, the most accurate information about health and education and global problems in the global south? We want some form of AI to have those answers. Maybe we want African AI to have answers to these questions. There was no platform I could go to that was an African AI platform to answer the question. But obviously, there's a big blockage on accurate sources for AI about Africa. And maybe that will be the subject of what we're going to talk about today with our panel, is to what extent we're able to initiate AI in Africa. So I want to play for you a short video of 4 minutes in length with a couple of examples of people in Africa who are trying to break through the stranglehold of AI by the sort of 5 companies that we know of, most in the United States, most recently one in China that sent the stock price of NVIDIA tumbling when it announced its possibilities. So I'm going to play a little video which is bringing you some messages from Kenya, where they're trying to look at language translation tools, but they have a problem with training data for their AI. And then South Africa, where they're looking at health messaging for communities in African languages. But again, there's a question about whether they can access the source material.
My name is Kathleen Siminyu, and I am from Nairobi, Kenya. We can use AI to build language tools. So within the Masakani Research Foundation, we have a project known as Decolonize Science, and it's working to make accessible scientific material in various African languages. In the context of machine translation, the ideal data set is aligned text. And when I speak about aligned, this is at sentence level. If in Kiswahili I have the term Mimi ni msichana, I want an accompanying English text that says I am a girl. And then this data set is fed into a machine translation model. The Bible is a great source of aligned text for obvious reasons. It's already set out in chapters, in verses. The particular data set we used is one known as JW300, and it was created or curated from texts that are published by an organization known as Jehovah's Witness. Their data set was a very rich resource in availability or inclusion of African languages. We were able to connect to young people across the continent. It was easy for them to plug in because all they needed to do was select the language they wanted to train a model for. We published loads of papers. We managed to train very many machine translation models, and this work has been widely successful in research circle. Subsequently, beyond that comes the not so great stuff. We started to realize that, hey, we should investigate the origins of this JW300 dataset.
They had a copyright notice. You could click on it and read what do they allow you to do and what don't they allow you to do. And they really laid it out that they do not allow text data mining. So the best thing to do was to write to Jehovah's Witness and say, hey, this is what we're doing. And we've seen that you don't allow us to do that, but this is why we're doing it. And we believe that it would be fair use.
Jehovah's Witness declined. So The models still exist, they're still published, we still have the accolades we have received for the work that has been done, but then there's now a gap in the community because it's not as easy for very new researchers to plug into the work.
Here at the University of Pretoria, I run the Data Science for Social Impact Research Group, and 70% of the work, it used to be less, has now shifted mostly to working in language. We mostly work on AI in African languages and use cases for low resource scenarios. So one of the things we've been interested in more recently is how can you build FAQ systems? We wanted to use large language models in African languages to be able to take questions that were being asked, check the FAQ, and then be able to respond and do that completely in their language. Now, when it came to thinking about the experiences that people might have in the health system, how are you going to find examples of people talking or interacting about the health system in such a way that you've got that text in the way that they would actually converse?
Good morning and a very hearty welcome. I'm Dr. Victor Ramatisi.
Yipi indlela engeza ngayo
yakho ngisheke ne-oxygen yakho
kajeno re bua ka di-ultrasound.
We have a national broadcaster in South Africa, the SABC. So the nice thing is that they have a lot of medical actuality shows, right, where they might have a doctor or a health specialist speaking to the public and the public responding.
So let's leave it there. Two examples where
in Africa you have practitioners of AI trying to get AI going and questioning whether they can access data sets. In the first one, it's a data set owned by Jehovah's Witness in the United States. In the second case, it's broadcast material, and the South Africans in the University of Pretoria are trying to access broadcast material from a South African public broadcaster, and I didn't finish the video, but they're having a lot of difficulty negotiating access. So let's come to Chebet Koros from Strathmore CIPIT and ask you about the kinds of copyright laws in Africa that would facilitate this kind of AI, even under circumstances where the owners of the data, the holders of the data, say no text and data mining, no use of our information for AI.
Thank you, Ben, and good evening to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'll take it back to the Jehovah's Witness case that we've just watched. CIPIT was involved in interacting with them when they were looking for the background information on the copyright behind the data sets. So when we found that they are not allowed to use that data set, we came to question about what are the limitations and exceptions to the copyright notice that are available. So the copyright notice for the JW300 dataset or Jehovah's Witness is care of USA, which means that fair use exceptions would apply. However, since it's being used in Kenya we have the fair dealing exceptions. And the difference between this is that fair use is very broad, and so TDM or text data mining can apply there. In Kenya, we have the fair dealing exception. So because of these questions, it led us to doing research around this, and we came to find that in Kenya, we have an exception for fair dealing, which is closed, which means that it allows only specific uses for as an exception. And scientific research falls under those exceptions. However, the question is, does TDM fall under scientific research? So the challenge we found, or even the people who we interviewed, is that there's uncertainty in the law because we do not know whether TDM would fall under scientific use, research, or even fair use. So that would be the situation where you have exceptions to the copyright law, which would allow for that.
And then there are one or two countries in your study which had no exception at all. So because Masakani is a continent-wide network, so some of the members in other countries in Africa have no exception at all.
Yes, so we looked at a couple of countries. We also compared with South Africa, which has a copyright amendment bill, which would be shifting to fair use, which is broader. But we looked also at Ghana, which doesn't quite talk about the exception for research. So in such a scenario, it's very unclear whether that would be allowed.
Thanks, Chebet. Now, one of the challenges is getting, for Africans, is getting AI going, natural language processing of the kind that we've talked about. But the problem is we want it to get going in Africa, where Africa is behind, and not just give the data away instantly to those who are ahead of the curve when it comes to AI. So in CIPIT, in Strathmore University, you've been working on a license for creators to make work available for AI training, amongst other purposes, in Africa, but not elsewhere. Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, so this was a collaboration between CIPIT's director, Dr. Melissa Omino, and the University of Pretoria in South Africa, Dr. Chijioke Okorie, from the Data Science Law Lab. So they came together and they came up with an alternative open licensing model called the Nuolite Obodo Open Data License, or NOODLE for short. So the difference between this is where it's trying to come up with a solution where we're looking at the African users of an open data license and the non-African users, and ensuring that there's equity in the sense of access. So in this case, African users would have a broad access to the data, whereas users outside of Africa would have to provide some form of benefit for access to that data.
So I think that's a first, to have a license. It's not legislation, but it's a license that says we're creators, we are feeding AI or research systems, and if you're in Africa, you can use our stuff. If you're outside of Africa, you'd have to come and talk to us if you wanted to use our stuff.
Yes.
Now, let's move on for a minute to Gloria, who is in Nigeria. And Gloria, you're working on sourcing new data which could be used in training language models. And you've coined the term data farming as opposed to data mining. What's that about? Why data farming? What's the distinction between farming and mining?
Thank you very much. Just as Chebet rightly said, there has been issues surrounding curation of data, especially in the area of speech data sets. For context, in Lanfrica, we were able to provide what we call Lanfrica records, over 1,400 of other people's copyrighted works, but we brought them together on a space online, so that it's very, very easy. If you're looking for research, you can easily go there and know that this kind of person has done this in this African language. So that's Lanfrica records. And the copyrights, we make sure go back to these original owners. And then in the area of creating speech data sets, we were able to curate 1,800 hours of speech data set in 3 Nigerian languages under a project we called Niger Voices. Our ability to do that was actually because of the concept, the idea of data farming. We saw the whole idea of exploitation of data as something of a mindset. When you're out to mine something, you're actually exploiting that thing. You're taking it. So whether it's human language or minerals and resources, the same problem exists. So when we are into this curation of data, we now thought, what can we do? We now say, okay, let's have a new approach, which we call data farming. We are going to look for data, curate this data, working with language owners, but we bring them on board. First, we realized that there was paucity of awareness about AI in Africa. So when we are working with these language owners, we strive first to create that awareness, let them know what is happening. It is their own conversation. They need to be part of what is going on. So we bring them in and form an online community. And then from there, when we finished the creation of data like the Niger Voices project, we were able to get a license that enabled us to ensure that if you are using a data set for research, it is free. But if you are using it for commercial purposes, then you come to have a partnership agreement with us so that you donate some money, which we will use. We'll go back to this same community for them to create more data because we need more data in Africa.
So let me jump in. Let me jump in and say to you.
Okay, there's also a third factor, which is the language growth. When you look for African languages online, first thing you won't even see enough. And even the ones you see are tilted towards particular areas, either politics, one thing or the other. So discussion about children, women, you don't get them there. So that's why we decided to work with the local language owners, to bring, to cover these marginalizations and biases. Good. So we help in promoting the African languages by creating new. Instead of going to take what is already existing, we work with the language owners to create new lexicons, new sentences. Thereby, like the Niger Voices we did, at the end, these three languages had over 15 million new sentences, simply because we are working with the language owners. So we successfully got the data we needed, but because we are farming it, not mining, we're able to give back to the language, we're able to give back to the community, those that own it financially. We're also able to give back to the data sets by ensuring that it keeps growing. Thank you.
Thanks, Gloria. I'm going to print a little badge which says farming, not mining, to give out later. I hope people will be interested. But seriously, what Dr. Koros and Professor Emezue are talking about is changing the relationship between those who are doing the AI processing and the providers of the information, the providers of the data. I think both of you are concerned with giving those who are providing the language data which is used to train AI more power, more of a stake in its use with your license and with your farming. But we do have a problem, and I think we need to come to it soon, which is, what about the existing data? If we're farming, it means we're creating new data to train AI. But there may be Jehovah's Witness Bibles out there. There may be 1 million already copyrighted works that we want people to be able to use for new AI projects in Africa and in Latin America without having to go and farm it tomorrow. We still support the farming, but we want access to the other stuff too. Before we go to that question, I want us to hear about Latam GPT. So, Alexandra García in Chile, you are trying to build a model called Latam GPT. We wish you good luck in challenging the big guys. What's the purpose of Latam GPT?
Okay, we are also trying a novel approach to build AI. I think it's more similar to what Gloria talked about, because we are trying to do a collaborative project. We are trying to contact all the institutions in Latin America, and that is a huge and ambitious project, because we are talking with the government, with institutions on the different countries that form part of Latin America, because we realize that models like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude that we all use don't represent Latin American culture as we want it to, because when we ask questions about our culture, it's not well represented. Of course, it talks in Spanish very well, we know, but when we ask for the culture, it's not there. So what we are aiming to do is asking for permission, doing strategic alliances with all the institutions, all the countries. And also we went a step further to search every link or URL to do web scraping and check the license, even ask for explicit permission to the owners of this link. So it's a very novel kind of doing AI. So I think our main goal is to have a model, and of course we are not aiming to be as competitive to ChatGPT, because we are not crazy, we know that we don't have the technology and we don't have the amounts of data that maybe have Google or that kind of company. So we are trying to do our best do good or more a better AI, to know what data we have. Yeah. So.
And the thing is that you need to be doing it yourselves in Latin America because you're part of the culture and you understand the culture. And the difference between the existing AI is that you want to have partnerships, you want to have agreements, you want to have understandings with those who are creating the data, which of course reminds me of the AI Act of Brazil, where it mandates a relationship with creators, because Brazil passed a pioneering act recently, law, which said that creators must always be remunerated, except for certain very specific cases. So maybe we should talk a little bit more about that. Before we go there, let's ask the first question. Question number one. I might have a list of questions for you, B. Question number one is, what about existing copyrighted data for AI startups in Latin America and Africa? Do we have the exceptions we need? What would be a message to WIPO and to these kind of negotiations on broadcast, on LNEs, if we want to get AI going for the first time in the South?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you so much. As president of Vía Libre, I'm really thankful for you being here and the space at WIPO, and Ben for moderating, and Bishop for supporting us. I'm really happy to be here talking about these things, because I think the main thing we have to address, and I think that's the main goal of this panel, is somehow change the narrative regarding AI. Because the current narrative regarding AI makes us feel that the only possible AI is the one that is being done by the 5 or 10 big tech corporations that we all know. And that reflects a very predatory form of getting data. The first thing I would like to share with you is that there are a lot of projects of AI that are smaller, that are more efficient, that are possible, and that reflect cultural diversity. And at this table, we have just a few of them, but there are a lot of them in Africa and in Latin America. The problem we are facing, especially in Latin America, which is the place where I live and the legislation I know the most, is that the uncertainty regarding copyright rules is somehow blocking our capacity to move faster and to get all the culture we need to reflect in our own AI in a different way. We don't have, at least most of our countries in Latin America, any exception on the TDMs. So we know that text and data mining is not allowed in most of our regulations, with the sole exception of Cuba, and I guess there is something small in Ecuador. But the rest of the countries don't have this kind of flexibility that could allow us to feel free to do text and data mining for research, for education, for whatever, non-profit or public interest AI. But the other thing we are facing is that we know in the US there are currently a lot of cases in court. If you don't, there is a really interesting website that is following all these cases, which is the ChatGPT is eating the world.com. It's a really, really interesting place where there's a map where all the cases are reflected. But we know that in those cases, the big companies have enough money to afford uncertainty. So they go, they get the data, they do their models, they conquer the market, and then they see what happens in the legal field, and they are ready to do the arrangements, the monetary arrangements that it would take in case they lose the cases. But that's a luxury we cannot have in Latin America. We don't have any chance to do that. So when we started talking with Latam GPT, my first question was, what's your IP policy? And they said, should we? why? And we started working on this. We cannot afford uncertainty because none of these projects could survive a single cease and desist letter, because we are not in a position to go to court and fight for our right to do anything with the data. So this is something else we have to see. It's from a global South perspective, we don't have that back to support anything. So we need a certainty. We need to know that what we do is right and that we will not afford any dead-end case because we cannot do that. So we need to have this certainty by having flexibilities, by having the legal certainty that we can do AI from the South. Because if we don't have, the only AI that will remain will be that AI that is predatory, that is managed and monopolistic, managed by the 4 or 5 or 10 big tech. And that's not what we want. We are trying to change that narrative and this paradigm.
So, but we're in a bit of a bind right now. We're in a bit of a difficult corner because we haven't gotten started with the AI in the global South. We are behind the curve. We have got started, but we're behind the curve. And the world is talking about the dangers of AI. The world is talking about regulating AI and, of course, remunerating creatives whose work goes into AI. So I'm going to go back to the Brazil Act to talk about that. Is it possible to show my slide on the screen again? I put in a picture of me and I said to AI, can you convert that picture into a Studio Ghibli version of me? And I just did it to frustrate you, Beatriz, because I know, this is a case that is frustrating a lot of us. And it right away did it, came up with this Studio Ghibli alternative. Everyone's talking about that case at the moment where this Japanese anime studio, its style is being, represented and reproduced. Styles are not copyrighted. So, you can get away with it. But how do you unleash the space for global South AI without opening the doors to the predatory practices? How do you make sure that the creators in the global South are not having their works exploited for purposes that might be piracy, substitution in the market, mimicry, all of that, while still ensuring that the cases that, Chebet and Gloria and Alexandra are working on have some data?
Thank you, Ben. Well, I don't have the answer. I think no one has the answer. I just challenge if anyone has the answer in this room, because that's the big question that we have to work to address. First of all, let me say something on the Studio Ghibli case. Studio Ghibli is a case that is really, really successful for OpenAI because with this case of Studio Ghibli, they are predating personal data, which is also protected. And there's a lot of people, thousands of people, giving them their face, their colleagues' faces, and all these images to help them train their models. So it's something that it's working in another level as well. It's not only that they are using Studio Ghibli, but they are using Studio Ghibli to get thousands of people's data to train their data sets. So more predatory, I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine something more predatory than that. But the answer is really, really, really hard because. So you gave OpenAI the rights on your face to train their model. Did you agree on that?
Only for the purposes of this meeting.
Only for the purposes. Well, but they already have that. So I think the question is really, really hard, and I cannot answer. First of all, I don't mean to answer that question because there's no easy way. Because, for example, if you ask everyone who is training something to pay the creators, then you have something that I've heard from Andrés Guadamus last year. I don't know if you were here last year in the session on AI. He calculated how much it will go to each author in case some corporations pay, and the amount of money was insignificant, was just such a small amount of money, because the amount of data they are using to train is so big that checking who's going to receive anything from that, it's somehow like a nightmare, because you have to look for people writing blogs on the internet, you have to go for people publishing whatever on the internet who are owners of their contents, but you also have to go through all the books, and the books they've used to train ChatGPT are thousands, millions, I don't know how many, but how do you calculate? So it's a transaction nightmare, that, because then the other thing you have is that this model on paying for using things for training is also based on the idea that those doing AI and training models have money to pay. And most of the projects and initiatives in the Global South don't have that amount of money to pay someone. So that will clearly block any development. So one big problem here is the concentration of AI, because if you ask anything to ChatGPT, you get an answer that comes from a man from the north. So that doesn't reflect this Global South at all. So how do we envision an AI that reflects us all? I don't think copyright is the answer. There are many other answers, possible answers. And let me say something on Studio Ghibli. I think moral rights could work for Studio Ghibli if they want to go, because moral rights covers the right to be recognized as an author, but also the right to not be attributed for something that you didn't do. So saying that no, you are not there anymore, but this is a Studio Ghibli, it's in violation of Studio Ghibli's rights. Yeah. They didn't do that. So I think moral rights could work in these specific cases. So
let's be ready to open up for questions for our remaining 10 minutes. But I wanted just to say, we're making the mistake that everybody makes when they talk about AI, which is that we're using the term AI as if it describes one thing. And of course, it describes 100,000 different things. So let's put at one end of the spectrum research going on in the Global South using computational methodologies. That's AI. We want to allow it. We want to promote it. We want to light a fire to let it blossom and bloom, and we want laws to make it possible. We don't want to do anything at WIPO that prevents new AI startups in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Chile, in everywhere in Latin America from getting going. If they are in research institutions, that must happen. Right at the other end of the spectrum is generative AI using cultural works aimed at making money by substituting for the original cultural work. So, a rap song in the style of Drake, which actually then beats, his sales in the market 5 minutes later, by being trained on his music, which, by the way, is out there. So that's right at the opposite end of the scale. So somehow in between, we need discriminating factors. And as we go to the questions, maybe these are some of the discriminating factors. We have to have in our minds what type of work is going into the AI. Is it scientific work? Is it cultural work? And that's not good enough as a discriminating factor, but we better know, is this research to help us solve climate change problems? Is this research that is going to help us deal with the next pandemic? It's scientific. Or is it a cultural expression, which arguably could be going out for entertainment purposes and competing with other entertainment? Secondly, what's the user that's taking the AI content in and spewing it out again? Is it a research institution in the global south? Is it women in the global south, or is it, the predatory global north, big tech making money out of data extracted from the global south? Thirdly, what's the purpose? So that's then regulating the output of AI. Are we trying to generate new research outputs, or are we trying to come up with a new best-selling song to compete in the market? And then if we're going to be discussing AI regulation and the rights that people have, the copyrights or the moral rights or others, we need to keep an eye on what that right is. It is an exclusive right to make AI if you tick the other boxes, or is it that, for example, in the Brazil case, which I keep coming back to because it's out there and it's we have to confront the call for remuneration for creatives. Is it about remunerating people but still being able to do the AI? So that's not the answer, but it's a shopping list of ways we might think about AI regulation. At that point, do we have any interventions or questions? Yes.
Good evening to the speakers. I was very delighted when I listened to your various interventions. But before we move over at what you just said, Jasmine, I think the first thing to answer to all these questions would be to address what feeds AI. I think this is the key issue. And when I just listened to the comments of the film, what happened in Kenya about the difficulty in accessing, I think, the data from Jehovah's Witness or something on broadcasting. I think last week I was speaking to one of our experts and I was telling him, tell me more about AI. He said, Bejito, just look, it's quite simple. You're talking about something as if it's just new. When you want to text someone, you have some proposals, the next word and so on. I mean, but your phone generates this based on your previous messages. But at the same time, the owner of the network and your cell phone has already taken all those information in the database. But do you have access to the database? Are you able to use it on your own purposes? Imagine that you want to develop the schemes of your previous statements since you've been working for 20 years. What will you do? You have to go and ask a request, and you're not sure that they will give you access to those information. We think the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that if you want to create room for creative AI in various consistencies, it will be to address the issue of data. Unless we resolve those issues, it will be difficult to give enough room and flexibilities to our creators, to our engineers, to develop the various tools and applications. And it's something that we've been floating the past years, and you have difficulties to address this. I think the African group, in its proposals on limitation and exceptions, we try to address that through some fields in which the exclusive right will not operate, or those having those exclusive rights will be bound to give access to future demanders in case. But we're having difficulties to advance also in this domain. I think it's time here to maybe it's appropriate venue to request support from other members on these key issues. You said you talked about research, you talked about education and so on. If you have limitations and exceptions when it comes to exclusive right in this domain, we think the issue that some of our distinguished speakers faced will be resolved. So we think we should have it in the open mind. We will not stop AI. It's something which just happened. It's how do we get into the game? What do we do to secure certain maneuver room to prevent, or I would say to prevent exclusive right that will, at the end of the day, make it more difficult for our stakeholders to properly operate in this domain. We think this is where we need to focus our attention. And to do that, we need to address the issue of data. Data localizations is a key issue. I don't want to speak more. I think we have limited time. Thanks.
Thanks, Chito, which I think is what Chebet and Gloria are addressing. They want the data to either be generated by Africans with African interests at heart, or there to be a license when data is created, if it's creative work, that if its destination remains in Africa, would you do a new version of your license which says if the destination remains in the global south, not just in Africa, then it can be used differently than if its destination is in the north?
Yes, so the current version is version 1, and based on the usage and the questions that come out of the usage, this can be changed. What is important to remember is that the reason behind this license is that the current open data licenses we have act as a one-size-fits-all, whereas in the African context, that's not the case. As one of our panelists has talked about, we can have two people having access to data. However, their situations are different. So one person from a developed country will be able to have more access to resources where they can process that data, whereas in Africa, that's not possible. So it needs to be equitable, and that's why the license has that two-tier system.
Let's have another audience contribution. I mentioned Brazil several times, so Carolina from Brazil.
Now you're giving Brazil the voice. One thing behind the Brazil bill that is important to keep in mind, and it's our main topic here at WIPO right now, is that what we have, like he said, is the data problem. That's the big problem that we have to address. It's kind of impossible to address. And as a country, as government, what we see as possible to do in Brazil is to have a bill that can address the big problem from the big stakeholders that we have right now, that is the creative sector. I work for the Minister of Culture, so I have their side in my mind. So what they complain is that the way of them to live, it's living away. They have no money anymore because the big companies, the big techs, are stealing their work and they are giving up for free and they don't have any money behind that. So what we are doing now is trying to protect them. And then if we win a big fight against the biggest companies in the world, then in the planet, my son always tells me not to say the word because I can never say right. So if we can win the fight and we can make the big companies pay anything to the creators, to the artists that we have to protect right now, because it's their work they're being steal. It's a steal. They're stealing everything. And they're just using it. No one is paying anything. They pay the electric bill. They pay their water. They pay their rent. Why they're not paying their creators? They're not paying any data at all since forever, 20 years already. They don't pay any data. So that's our background on building the law. We know the exceptions. We know the scientific is always an exception in our copyright laws and that stuff. But right now, our main fight is to make and win over the big techs, to create some rights over the digital environment, over AI. So that's the main problem that we see right now. And if we put, like we say, have a say in Brazil, you have the bow and you have the car. If you put the car in front of the cow, you're never going to go anywhere. So our main goal now is to make a right, win over the big techs, and then we can work on creating, I think, if not an exception, at least ways of, we have a lot of, in Brazil, because we have a different collective management system that works really well. So that's one way that we want to make this remuneration work back home, is using the collective management to get this money from the big tech. So we have this is already really, really good. So that's the way that we are thinking. But we have a lot of ways to give money to the small companies, to the startups back home. Another minister works on that. But they have these forms of a lot of public money that they can give to the startups so they can have what you guys are talking here, that small companies trying to fight over the big techs and to have local and our culture in the AI. It's a huge, huge fight. I think it's bigger than the one that we are trying to fight right now, that to give our artists the money that they deserve. and their way of living back. Because when they were used to sell the CDs and think they would get their money, but now they're not getting almost anything. So that's the background on the Brazilian legislation. We didn't pass yet. We passed the Senate. Now we're going to the House of, So we are still fighting, and it's a big fight. But that's the main thing. We need to win over the big techs, and that's a big, huge fight to have any money from them, because they don't want to pay anyone.
And I think we have that in common with...
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. I think we have to look very close to what Brazil is doing, because I think you have exactly the right perspective on what is happening with the big tech. This thing that is happening with the big tech is happening to many sectors, not only the creators sectors. Yeah. This AI revolution, let's call it, and without willing to be exaggerating the perspective, but it is a revolution. It's suppose a big revolution in many fields. The creators field is one of them, specifically for the generative AI, especially music and images and arts and language models. But it's impacting many other sectors. I think the biggest problem we have here is that there is a few getting a tool that is increasing productivity, because, for example, in the programmers field, something that before took 10 programmers now can be done in 8 hours by one programmer with the support of one of these. These guys, these people will no longer have a job in the future. So it is a really strong impact in society, and I think this issue of making them pay should be our main goal, because they are getting all the productivity to their own packets. They are getting all the productivity, and the workers, including the artists, are always less, and unemployment, and there will be a lot of serious consequences. Yeah. So I think this is the kind of thing we have to think together with different other fields, not only the creators, but also the programmers and many other fields that are being impacted by this kind of technology. So
let's bring one or two other voices in. But at the same time, in our little corner where we're talking about getting AI going in the Global South, we're talking about what we need to do to make sure that door remains a little open to research, to AI, to knowledge creation in the Global South. I think you have a research exception, even in the current draft. So it's an exception based on who the institutions are who are doing the AI. Yeah. And if they're research, so that's was on my list. That means if the user is a research institution, then there are some exceptions. Yeah. So maybe we look at some of the other exceptions and say, while still winning the main battle. There's one or two other voices, one at the back, and Jamie I saw as well.
Okay. Hello. Savas from Cyprus. But I'll start with Professor Beatriz. I think Professor Beatriz tried to say it, but she didn't say it rightly. It's a race. It's a race. AI now, it's a race, international race. And unfortunately, whoever has the money is winning. It's like when you're racing in horses and you have thoroughbreds and the other ones have donkeys or, whatever they have. But that's true. And this is what we are facing. The administration of Trump, with his partners, whatever, he's investing 500 billion. The GDP of most of the countries of all South Global is not 500 billion, I'm sure. I mean, if you add them all together, especially the African countries. So we are facing actually a race. And this AI race, it has to unite all these South Global and the African countries. And the only way you do it is with investment. You need to be united, and you need to invest for the future of your generations, of your children, of your young people. Because at the end, what is AI? AI is technology. It's new technology. If China succeeds, if America succeeds, if whoever succeeds, is against all the other world. And the other thing I want to say, and I want to ask a question, is the connectivity. The connectivity of Africa, the cables, we hear about the cables now. 99% of the total connectivity of the world in internet is through the cables. the submarine cables. All these investments has to be done. So you are connected, not just farming, because farming, what is farming? Farming is to find the data. So if you are not connected, you will not be able to get all the information. So I wanted to say these two things, and I wish the best for all the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
When I was listening to the presentations, and I think what came to mind, and especially when Chebet and Professor Gloria spoke, was, and you mentioned it about, we want to get into the game to be part of the players in this field. And of course, it's been mentioned that data is part of the thing that we have to deal with. And I guess what Chebet and Gloria are doing is part of dealing with the data problem in a certain way. For example, in farming it such that we produce what is authentically ours from the South. But then that also opens a door. In a way, I don't know what safeguards exist or that you are putting in place to prevent the predatory exploitation that has been there. And I think it also brings to mind the kind of treaties that we are negotiating in many other different forums where this issue keeps coming up. We are talking of the issues of traditional knowledge, traditional cultural expressions. We just finished negotiating a treaty in May last year on genetic resources. And I think part of the big fight has been how to prevent that knowledge and that, which is basically data, from being exploited by our partners from the North. Now, when we are getting into this game, I think there is a big question of what safeguards are we going to put to be able to prevent that exploitation happening, that in our attempt to get into the game, that we also don't expose ourselves. I think for us, in a rudimentary way, for example, I remember in May, our pushback was to really fight against the formation of these databases on traditional genetic resources, which was being pushed really hard. And you could tell, well, you form a database, then again, it becomes quickly exploitable, even through a backdoor, despite the safeguards that you put. So I think it's also very important as we continue going forward, even as we continue engaging in other forums, in other negotiations, that even we as delegates really think about that aspect that comes in with AI. I think that's just the point I wanted to put.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The gentleman at the back from Cyprus said, invest, 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 or you won't win the race. I suppose the only other option is change the rules of the race. Every race has rules. Somebody will ignore the rules. Somebody in the world is ignoring most rules. But we still have to have some optimism about setting new rules. Brazil, I think, is leading the way. Jamie, KEI has a side event tomorrow, by the way. I think we'll continue the conversation there, but your contribution, Jamie?
Yeah. Thank you. The title of the side event tomorrow is that AI is not just about the cultural industries. And I think in some of the reactions to the sort of idea that people are being exploited, and some of the most important and persuasive and sort of high-profile cases come from the cultural industries and from artists. And yet the whole development of the AI thing are really much broader than that. So in terms of the type of data that's taken from any country, they're probably having access to much more data that's not from their country if you look at the larger picture. So it's not as if everyone's getting ripped off. You're actually getting access to quite a bit of data outside your country. A lot of the concerns, I think, are about the sort of monopolization, concentration of power, potentially sort of it's like new concentrations of power and wealth that are troublesome. But instead of just thinking that everyone sort of draws a moat around their own data and hopes everyone else does the same thing, I mean, I think a bit more attention to the control of anti-competitive practices, things that you do to deal with monopoly power, and some of the doctrines like essential facilities on the data and things like that, like the new European database, the new regulation published in March of this year on health data, which is on data spaces for health, is a quite different approach that people probably need to take a look at. So I think that the cultural industries have, I think, a special case that should be taken seriously, but you shouldn't assume that that's the same model you have to look for science, mathematics, engineering, climate data, and a lot of other areas where inclusivity is really, really important in terms of the quality of what you might get out of AI services.
Thanks, Jamie. We're going to give the last word to our panel, I think. If you want to, in your concluding remark, you can say something about it. Is it about the work? Is it about the user? Is it about the purpose? Or is it about the type of right? Or you can say anything else you want. I think that in particular, Chebet and Gloria, who came for the first time to WIPO, would be keen to share in more detail the work that they're doing with delegates. Alex came for the first time as well. I'm sorry, I thought you'd been before. So all three of you in particular, we've been before, would be keen to share some aspects of the work they're doing on the data. Chebet.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed being on the panel and sharing a bit more about our work, and I'm happy to share in detail outside in the corridors. Regarding your question, is it one of the four? I think for this license, it fits us in each of them because it talks about which the user, the purpose, and the different features of the license will fall under any of the four. So, yeah, thank you.
All four.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. In a nutshell, I've talked about change of perspective in the approach to data and the whole AI, but I also think that in area of copyrights and intellectual property, there might even be need to have an AI for that. Because when you look at the speed with which every day there are new things in the field of AI, today we're talking about the big tech, and there's this assumption that some people are those big tech. Tomorrow, these people we are fighting for could actually be the big tech now. So there's this change that is so fast that is going on. So there are different, apart from the people, the parameters Ben had listed, I think you also need to add that the speed and the rate of change is really very fast. And then another very important factor I notice in the field of AI is the excitement. Yes, we're complaining now that people's data are being used, but I'm happy you said you just wanted to find out, so you took your picture and put there. Tomorrow you might come up complaining that these people are also using your picture, they're exploiting you. So there's this excitement about AI, that's the first time you encounter it, you just want to find out, does this work? If it really works, what can I do for it, with it and all that? And I think that is part of the area or the genesis of later on what we begin to complain about exploitation. And I was also interested in Beatrice's remarks. There's also this idea that once AI come up, many people are going to lose their jobs. Many people, the artists, the musicians. My area is literary studies. So the writers, the creative writers, will now stop writing. But what if they are using AI to actually produce better works, faster works than what they are doing? So there's these nuances in this conversation, which I think we might have to really look at. And I think that's what makes the field of AI very, very complex and very interesting. Thank you.
That would be a nice problem if the problem we have is that the global south has the big tech. Alexandra.
Okay. Well, for us, the main problem is, of course, representation. Also, the transparency of the data. And also, something that distinguishes us is the strategic that we are doing, because if you see the technical reports of these big techs, they don't report anything about the data. They only say, we use books. We use books 1, books 2, and Wikipedia, and we don't know what is that. I mean, we are blindly developing this technology. So what we are doing is really revolutionary in that kind of way, because we are doing all the job, the slow job of curating data, doing an open source model collaboratively, in the collaborative way. So I think that it's a big, how do you say, it's changing the way that we are developing AI. So I think today, as someone of you said, it's a race, but it's not depending only on the amount of data. It also depends on the quality of the data. We have good examples as Mixtral in Europe. So they did a small model, but they invested in good quality data, and they are doing great stuff. So why we in Latin America can do the same? We are hoping to do that. So, of course, it's something that we as Chileans cannot do alone. So we are trying to invite everyone in Latin America and also in other countries that has data, good quality data in Spanish and Portuguese and about the culture, that come and do this as a team. You know, that is very revolutionary to me. So that's the message.
Well, there is a race, but there is a race, and we are not all going to the same places. So, let me add something. I think there is already a winner of this race, and it's not the US, it's China. It is just the data here at WIPO. You see how many patents they have on these technologies, and they are running fast. And the publication and the dissemination of DeepSeek, it was game-changing, because they proved that you can do a model with less resources that is more efficient in many things. And there is something that already Alexandra said that I want to close with these remarks. Is not only these 4 topics that Ben brought us for the debate, but also the openness of the model. If you do a model that is really open, don't be misguided by this fancy name OpenAI, because it has nothing to do with openness. It's just a fake openness. It's not open at all. But there are models that are really open, and those are the models that we could learn from, implement, run in our places, so we can collaborate from the Global South. And we have to design collaboration between the Global South. We need this collaboration, because there is no other way to run this race. And of course, it is a race, but it's not the race. We are not going to the same place. We don't want to go to the same place that OpenAI is going. We want to do something else, and we need certainty. We need to have the security that these kind of projects like Latam GPT and all the projects Massacane in Africa are running their own race with the certainty that they will not collapse under copyright laws that prevent us from doing what the Global North has already done. That's it.
Thank you, Beatriz.
Thank you, and thank you for being here.
As we search for certainty at the time of the greatest uncertainty, thank you to Vía Libre Foundation for setting us up. Thanks to support from PIGIP and Arcadia, and thank you most of all, and to Patricia for organizing it, who didn't make it, and Carolina, who stood in for her. Patricia, I think, is still not here. Thank you to you all for coming and spending a little bit of time. This is the beginning of a conversation, not the end. 2 seconds to Brazil.
2 seconds just to say that on the information session on Thursday, my boss, the secretary, he will explain our AI bill in detail. So please come to listen and make questions, and make a lot of questions, please. He loves questions.
Thank you.